Good morning, everyone. I'm calling this meeting of the Board of Chiropractic Examiners Government and Public Affairs Committee. It is being held by teleconference pursuant to the statutory provisions of Government Code Section 1. It is Monday, March 13, 2023, and the time is 11 a.m. The board's paramount responsibility is to protect the health, welfare, and safety of the public through licensure, education, engagement, and enforcement in chiropractic care. Members of the public may also address the committee during the public comment session. Public comments will also be taken on agenda items at the time the item is heard and prior to the committee taking any action on said items. Those who would like to provide public comment will be limited to 3 minutes unless in the discretion of the committee, circumstances require a longer period. Members yield their allotted time to other members of the public to make comment. Individuals may appear before a committee to discuss items not on today's agenda. However, the committee may not discuss or take actions on these items except to decide whether to place the matter on the agenda of a future meeting. Please be aware this meeting is being recorded and please turn off silence while Mr. Sweet, please take roll.
Good morning. And just to advise, Ms. Cruz, your sound is a little bit choppy, so there's a way to rectify that. But I'll just take the roll quickly. Ms. Cruz.
Oh, is it still choppy?
Yeah, did we?
This is the moderator. Might I suggest cutting the video? That does consume bandwidth.
Okay. Present.
Okay, and Raphael Sweet, I am present. We have a quorum.
All right, thank you. I move to agenda item number 2, review and possible approval of the December 5th, 2022 committee meeting minutes. Are there any questions or comments or changes to the meeting minutes?
I don't have any. I will make a motion to approve the December 5th, 2022 meeting minutes.
And I second. Moderator, please open this agenda for public comment.
We are now accepting public comment on the meeting minutes. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dialing users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. And as a reminder, you will be given 3 minutes to speak with a 15-second warning. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the motion?
Yes. Mr. Sweet, please call roll for the vote.
Yes. Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Raphael Sweet? Yes.
All right, so moved. All right, moving on to agenda item number 3, item Board Administration's programming, business modernization and implementation of Connect system and status of boards pending rulemaking packages and the 2022 to 20 strategic plan. Ms. Walker, can you please provide your update?
Sure, thank you. So I wanted to begin this morning with an update on staffing and recruitment. Enforcement analyst Christina Bell recently retired from state service effective February 6th of 2023. Recruitment efforts are currently underway to refill her associate governmental program analyst position, as well as the vacant assistant executive officer and administrative technician positions. Also, our previous regulatory counsel, Heather Hoganson, accepted a promotional position at the Office of Healthcare Affordability, and her last day with DCA was March 3rd. So with that, we welcome our newly assigned regulatory counsel, Stephen Vong. Staff will be reaching out to him to schedule a meet and greet and then start working on our schedule of pending regulations with him moving forward. And then we'll also have him introduced to the board, hopefully at the April board meeting. Beyond that, I'd like to provide an update on the Connect system. We did have our latest software release on the evening of February 28th. And through that software release, we implemented refinements to the user dashboard for applicants and licensees. And we added the ability for users to upload and store their continuing education course records in the system. As the committee may recall, this software release was originally planned to coincide with the full implementation of our cashiering functionality in the system. However, user testing revealed that we needed to do some additional development before we can proceed with that functionality. So what the project team has decided to do was they move forward with the February 28th release so that we wouldn't hold any additional functionality back. And then we plan to implement the cashiering functionality separately this spring once it's complete. And the next focus for BCE is on the development and implementation of the continuing education provider portal so we can accept and process CE provider and course applications in the system. Are there any questions from the committee on the Connect project?
Yes, question. So I know it's only been actually barely 2 weeks since the implementation. How is I understand it may be too early to kind of get a feel for how the uptick is doing, but how's the communications kind of letting folks know how's that going so far?
So what we're currently doing is we did the release on February 28th, and they're doing a little bit of hardening of the system right now. It's actually offline and it's planned to go back up later today. So after they get that last step complete, we're going to be spreading the news through our electronic listserv, and then we're also going to be posting the information on our social media channels, and then we'll also be sending the information to the association so they can share it with their members as well, because we are looking to drive traffic to the new system. One of the benefits of these refinements that we made is not only the visual appeal and making it hopefully easier and more intuitive to navigate, but we also resolved a few underlying issues that were causing some bugs where users were having difficulty renewing. So once we feel that that's been stabilized, which we expect to be ready by about tomorrow, if not by Wednesday, then we're going to be getting the word out. And like I said, reaching out to the association so they can also help share it with their membership.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm happy to hear that we're kind of pushing it through kind of multiple channels. And then follow-up question on the cashiering functionality. Kind of based on what we know now, what is kind of the estimated timeline on that one since it's being pushed out?
At this point, I would estimate we're looking at late spring. We're probably looking around May. They had done some development work on it, and we have partial cashiering functionality in the system, but the missing component is with renewals. So if somebody sends a check, we can't renew that in the system and then have it process the payment and renew. So they've developed a functionality to where rather than it being a two-step process, which is what it currently is, where we cashier the check and someone has to manually enter the renewal, they've developed or they're working on developing a method for it to be just a one-time process where the same person that cashes the check, once the funds clear, then the renewal will just move forward automatically through the system. And they encountered a few hiccups just because it involves coordinating between both the Connect and our legacy CAS systems. So they're working through those, but my safe estimate is we're probably looking at May for them to have that done.
Yeah. So within Q2 is kind of approximately what we're saying. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Sure. And then, so moving another part of my update this morning is on our pending regulations. So as noted in our meeting materials, we currently have 20 pending regulatory proposals. As we've kind of seen over the past year, that number has shifted around just as we've reorganized and regrouped different proposals and tried to put them into pieces that that were small enough in scope that we could tackle it, primarily focusing on a single issue and being able to effectively move those forward. So we've completed that effort, and as you see in the materials, that comes down to a total list of 20, and they're at various stages of development. The Continuing Education Committee is currently developing the proposal to amend the board's annual continuing education requirements for licensees and the course approval process, as well as considering a proposal that would potentially mandate basic life support certification for all licensees. The Enforcement Committee is working on proposals to update the record-keeping requirements for licensees, update the disciplinary guidelines and implement the uniform standards for substance abusing licensees, and update the regulations regarding the role of unlicensed staff within a chiropractic practice. The Licensing Committee has been doing some work on discussion of filing addresses and practice locations with the board. And beginning at the next meeting, we're expecting that the committee will be developing regulations regarding the chiropractic college curriculum, as well as developing regulations for preceptorship programs. At the same time, staff is developing some rulemaking packages that would update the fee amounts within our regulations for consistency with our new fee schedule, repeal the sponsored free healthcare events regulations based on the repeal of the underlying statutory authority, develop the delegation of authority to the assistant executive officer package, as well as packages that would repeal CCR section 354 regarding, it's an obsolete provision regarding successful examination, as well as moving forward with the other changes to the chiropractic college regulations, excluding specifically the curriculum requirements that are being returned to the licensing committee for further study. Are there any questions from the committee on the status of our various pending regulations?
None for me.
Okay. With that, then I'm going to move to the budget portion of my update. So attachment 2 within the meeting materials contains our most recent fund condition statement, which includes that's following the release of the governor's proposed budget for fiscal year 2023 through 2024. Looking at the actual expenditures from last fiscal year, you can see that we spent $644,000 in expenditures that exceeded our revenue. That number was primarily due to the IT project, as well as unanticipated but increased costs from the Attorney General's office and the Office of Administrative Hearings. As the committee may recall, at last fiscal year, we hit a peak of our pending disciplinary cases, and many of those cases were adjudicated through the Office of Administrative Hearings, which not only resulted in significant AG costs, but also direct costs from OAH for conducting those hearings. This year is much more balanced. Our projected expenditures are just in line with what we expect to receive in revenue through this fiscal year, and our expenditures may be slightly lower if we can realize additional savings in our Attorney General's costs. Are there any questions from the committee on the budget?
One item for me, I was looking at under revenue transfers and other adjustments. I was just kind of looking for kind of across the line, income from surplus money investments. What really called out to me was the dip. I think the rest of the areas looked very consistent in terms of assumptions. I just wasn't sure what shifts from actuals of 8 million down to 1, then up to 18. Wondering kind of what's there.
Those are miscellaneous income, and I think it primarily varies just depending on interest rates and what we're making. And just to clarify, those are numbers in thousands, so there is variation there, but it doesn't have a significant impact on our fund.
Okay, all right, thank you. Everything else was relatively consistent. That one caught my eye.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. And I know we talked about it separately, about kind of showing, and not so much in this meeting, but even to the overall board general, starting to also show the budget differently, right? This is, I would say, the fund condition report, whereas a budget report would appear differently, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and we've evaluated some samples of reports that other boards are putting out, where it provides some specificity on the line items. So specifically looking at operating expenses, AG expenses, personnel expenses, not only based on the projection but also the actuals. So we do plan to get that implemented over the next few months into both committee and board meeting materials, so we can provide a little bit more detail on our fund condition and where those numbers are coming from.
Thank you.
Ms. Walker, I did want to ask, I mean, I know you mentioned that there might be some fluctuation in the expenditures with the AG's office. Is that just a function of how the enforcement proceeds, or are there things that we can do on our end to adjust how much we spend there?
For the most part, it fluctuates based on the number of cases and referrals that we have at the AG's office. The reason that there's things that we can do, but the problem with if we hold any cases back, or if we try to pull back on funds in one year, it's just going to add to our case aging. So it's largely dependent upon the cases that we have, and then ensuring that we're staying within our budgeted amount, which is for this fiscal year, it's $933,000. So as we get towards the end of a fiscal year, if it's looking like we're going to far exceed what we've allocated for that year, we may make a decision to potentially hold cases back. But the majority of those cost savings are found when we're able to effectively negotiate a stipulated settlement. And particularly when we can negotiate that settlement directly, through the AG's office with the other party, and not when we have to go to things like a mandatory settlement conference or a pre-hearing conference, where we're at that point incurring hearing costs from OAH and the AG's office. So that's primarily how we achieve those, is through after we've sent a case over for referral, just ensuring that if the case is appropriate for settlement, that we get out in front of it and negotiate that settlement, and not allow the case to proceed to hearing unless it's absolutely necessary.
Understood. Thank you for that explanation.
Thank you. Okay, and then the final portion of my update has to do with the strategic plan objectives. So within the meeting materials, we've included staff's action plan to implement each of the objectives from the board's 2022 through 2026 strategic plan. Of the 19 objectives contained in the plan, 12 are assigned to this committee, and then this committee in its general role also provides oversight of the entire board's progression towards achieving those objectives. But for purposes of today, I'm going to focus on the 12 that are assigned to this committee. So for objective 1.4, to monitor the board's fee structure, like I said earlier, the board's working on some internal budget activities to improve our reporting on the budget and the fund condition and expenditures to date. And then we also intend to begin discussions of the license fee structure with this committee, likely at the September meeting. We did just recently have the fee increase go into effect at the beginning of the year. So we do want to allow for this entire fiscal year to take effect, to see what types of changes that results in before we begin looking at the fee structure and potential needs for change. So at this point, we're monitoring and we are working on improvements internally. And then we plan to bring it to the committee later this year for a full discussion. Objectives 3.1 through 3.5 are based on the need to enhance the board's outreach and sharing of information through the use of social media and the website. Staff's been working on content for posting on the board's website, and after that content's been shared, we're planning on how we would not only post the content, but then develop a means to share it through social media. And then we also need to begin working on developing our outreach opportunities with various stakeholders, such as the public, chiropractic students, licensees, and CE providers. We have participated in a few outreach opportunities in the past. We've held a few listening sessions, but it's something that we want to schedule and make it more concrete and routine. So that's another area that we're looking to focus on. We did get some metrics from the department on the use of our website, so we're using that and looking at where people are attempting to get and the information they're trying to find on the website as our primary kind of first step is to enhance that portion of the website. And then, like I said, developing a strategic social media plan, but then also working on developing more of those outreach opportunities so we can engage with stakeholders. Objectives 4.1 and 4.2 address the need to update the board's rulemaking processes to realize efficiencies. So like I mentioned earlier, we've organized our 20 pending regulatory proposals, and we created an action plan really through the development of our 2023 rulemaking calendar. As far as next steps, our intent is to make sure that all of our staff that's at the Associate Governmental Program Analyst position or higher have completed the formal rulemaking training that's offered through the Office of Administrative Law. And then we want to get them more engaged in the development of the regulatory proposals. Where we've found the challenge is, in many cases, we've found proposals that have gone before the board and been voted on, but there wasn't necessarily enough of background information and analysis done before that occurred. So that's where we're now seeing at both the committee and the board level, you're seeing things that had been approved a few years ago that are now going back through that process. So instead, we want to make sure that we've got the adequate staff training in place and that we're doing those activities up front so that we don't put the committees and the board in that position in the future. Objectives 5.1 through 5.3 focus on our internal organizational development through improvement of the staff structure and training opportunities. We've made significant progress in this area as we're in the process of, we've already released recruitments for 3 vacant positions. We're in the process of getting approval for 3 additional positions to fill. And then after that, we'll be making sure that we update each of the duty statements of our existing staff to better reflect their role and the expectations of their positions. And then finally, Objective 5.4 addresses the need for us to update and redesign the board member onboarding procedures and orientation process. We're currently developing an online board member resource section that we can place in our Box account, where we intend to house all of our meeting materials, as well as an updated resource binder with more informative content for the board. The department's Office of Board and Bureau Relations also shared some examples with us from other programs, so we expect to use that as the basis for the development and improvement of our existing materials. Are there any questions from the committee on any of our strategic plan objectives?
No questions, but I do appreciate the layout, just kind of how everything is organized, and you would anticipate to start to see things over the next few years. So thank you so much for kind of organizing it the way you did. So thanks to the team.
Yeah, I would say the same. I appreciate your efforts and the team's efforts on these things as well. And then as Ms. Cruz alluded to, there's completion dates listed with a lot of the items on there. Are these completion dates, would you say that they're still accurate, or are these completion dates that we came up with at the time, or how do you think we're progressing on these things? I know that's a broad question because you listed a lot of things that are going on, so.
I would say, all in all, we're very much on target. Some of those items where it has a Q1 of 2023 date, some of them have been completed. Most of them are still in progress, but I would say that we're making good progress to either complete by the end of the month or maybe roll potentially into April. But for the most part, I would say that we're on target with just about all of those objectives. I don't have any concerns that we've fallen very far behind in any of them.
Great, I appreciate you pushing these forward.
And a quick question, with the different vacancies kind of happening right now, and especially, also folks transitioning into new roles, do we anticipate kind of anything kind of, I'd say not so much slipping, but anything kind of that we would require more flexibility?
No, I think where I believe we're at is we're in a position where we're kind of, our capacity is about hit with the current staff that we have, but I believe we've positioned ourselves in a manner that when additional staff come on board, it's going to help alleviate that, and we're going to be able to continue moving forward. I don't see the opposite occurring where the additional staff is going to create some kind of negative effect. It's going to allow us to just kind of open the floodgates, if you will, and get even faster progress on these items.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And that concludes my update on the administration program, unless there's any additional questions.
None for me.
And then for me, thank you.
All right, so I think we can open it up for comment. Moderator, can you please open it up?
We are now open for public comment on the updates. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. You're going to be given 3 minutes with a 15-second warning. And it looks like call-in user 2 has raised their hand. Bear with us just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone. You may need to dial *6.
Hello, everyone. This is Falcon. Thank you for today's meeting. Intern from Life Chiropractic College West. I just wanted to make a note about the future meetings that were scheduled. The full board meeting scheduled for April 20th has been listed. However, it did not say that it would be on WebEx. It said it would be in Northern California. Does that mean to attend that meeting, it'll have to be in person, or will there be a WebEx attachment for it? Because it's not listed currently, and the other meetings do have WebEx listed for those. Also, for strategic planning for the next few years, Life Chiropractic College West announced on Friday that they've expanded to another campus opening in Nebraska. And in the spirit of reciprocity with California, and I know that New York and Florida were also mentioned, it might also be noteworthy to include how Nebraska might also fit in with the reciprocity with California and the synchronicity that is involved with that process. Thank you for your time, and I'm excited to continue with you all.
Thank you, caller 2. And that appears to be all of our requests for public comment at the moment.
All right, thank you so much. And caller 2, thank you for your question. Any additional kind of questions, you may contact kind of our moderator and board staff to reach out to you kind of for any additional questions. And thank you again for participating. We can move on to discussion and possible legislation related to the board, chiropractic profession, and Department of Consumer Affairs, DC. Ms. Walker, can you provide a staff report on this item?
Sure, yes, thank you. So the purpose really of this agenda item is for the committee to discuss some pending regulation or legislation that's related to the board, the Department of Consumer Affairs, or the chiropractic profession. Of the 22 bills that are listed on the agenda, 9 of them are spot bills that don't require any discussion today. Those bills are AB 477, AB 913, AB 1101, AB 1369, AB 1646, SB 358, SB 764, SB 770, and SB 820. Staff is going to continue to monitor these bills and will bring them directly to the board for discussion at the April 21st meeting if any substantive amendments have been made to the bills that would require any board discussion. So with that, I'm going to begin with AB 765, Wood, Physicians and Surgeons. What this bill, it's known as the Patient Protection, Safety, Disclosure, and Transparency Act, would make various legislative findings and declarations regarding the use of titles by healthcare professionals. And what this bill would do is it would prohibit any person who's not licensed as a physician and surgeon from using medical specialty titles that are specified, or any titles, terms, letters, words, abbreviations, descriptions of services, designations or insignia alone or in combination with any other title indicating or implying that the person is licensed to practice as such. Within the bill, it specifies just a variety of those medical specialty titles. Of note, those titles include the terms neurologist and radiologist. And we are aware that there's many doctors of chiropractic who have obtained specialty certifications in those areas, and they often use titles such as chiropractic neurologist and chiropractic radiologist. They also use those terms to describe the description of their services. So staff has some concerns with potentially an increase in enforcement referrals for the use of these titles by licensees if this bill were to pass, and likely what that impact would be on our enforcement program. We already receive a pretty significant volume of complaints. We do our best to manage what we have, and we're concerned with the amount of complaints that may arise if this bill were to pass. At this point, our staff recommendation is to simply watch the bill, but we are, although the bill itself is within the Medical Practice Act and it's not directly related to our board, we're concerned about what the underlying enforcement impact may end up being if it were to pass. At this point, our recommendation is to watch, but it's just something to be aware of. To continue on, the next bill, AB 795, Flora, unlawful sale of equipment, supplies, or services. This bill is pretty straightforward. What this bill would do is, in current law, requires that makes it a misdemeanor if you sell any equipment, supplies, or services to any person with the knowledge that that equipment, supplies, or services will be used in the performance of a service or contract that's in violation of licensing requirements. Existing law excludes cash sales of less than $100, and then makes the fine not less than $1,000. What this bill would do would increase those amounts, so it would exclude cash sales up to $200, and then also increase the fine to not less than $200. Staff doesn't have too many concerns with this bill. We simply recommend watching it. Unlike the prior bill, we don't anticipate any real fiscal impact to this board, as this isn't a law that we often see violated or that we expend any enforcement resources on. So it's just something that we would be aware of, that the law had changed and we would take any action as appropriate, but not seeing as much of an impact as the prior bill. AB 796 has to do with athletic trainers. This bill would establish the California Board of Athletic Training as a new healing arts board within the department, and it would enact the Athletic Training Practice Act for the licensing, regulation, and discipline of athletic trainers by this newly established board. At this point, the recommendation simply from staff is to watch. This is one of two new healing arts boards that's being proposed during the current legislative session. We have AB 814, which has to do with veterinary medicine and animal physical rehabilitation. This bill, as introduced, it simply states the intent of the legislature to enact subsequent legislation to authorize a veterinarian to refer an animal to a licensed physical therapist holding an advanced certification in animal physical rehabilitation to provide animal physical rehabilitation under the supervision of that veterinarian. With this bill, staff notes that that advanced certification is available to healing arts professionals beyond simply a physical therapist. So there's the circumstances where a doctor of chiropractic may also hold that certification. So we'll be watching to see if this bill potentially when they do enact some sort of legislation with that authorization to see if it goes beyond simply physical therapy and maybe expands to other professions. AB 820, state boards and commissions with seniors. This bill, as introduced, simply states the intent of the legislature to enact legislation to increase representation for older adults on state boards and commissions. Staff recommendation at this point is simply to watch that bill. We will see what types of impacts that may potentially have after they've defined what it is they intend to pursue through that bill. One for discussion by the committee is AB 883, Mathis business licenses. It's the United States Department of Defense Skill Bridge program. This bill's been referred to the Assembly Committee on Business and Professions and would require the board and the other programs within DCA to expedite the initial licensure process for an applicant who supplies satisfactory evidence to the board that they're enrolled in the Skill Bridge program, which is an opportunity for service members to gain civilian work experience through specific industry training, apprenticeships, or internships during the last 180 days of military service prior to release from active duty. This is a bill where we're not seeing much in the way of impact fiscally for the board or even with workload. It's not something that we anticipate to receive a high volume of applications. We've already, through other legislation, there's already requirements that we expedite the licensure process for military veterans, for their spouses, as well as for those for asylees. So what this bill would do is implement another kind of requirement for us to expedite applications for a specific group. It's not something that we're, as far as the fiscal impact, we're not seeing much. There's just going to be a minor cost of updating our applications to request, to ask the question of whether or not the applicant qualifies under this program, and then reviewing any documentation received to make sure that they qualify for it. The staff recommendation on this one is to support, just similar to the other legislation that's already in effect, to get members of the military licensed faster. This is in line with that. So that's the thought and the justification behind that staff recommendation. AB 996 from Lowe is the Department of Consumer Affairs Continuing Education Conflict of Interest Policy. This bill has been referred to the Assembly Committee on Business and Professions and would require any DCA board or bureau that's responsible for approving CE providers or courses to develop and maintain a conflict of interest policy that, at a minimum, discourages the qualification of any CE course if the provider of that course has an economic interest in a commercial product or enterprise directly or indirectly promoted in that course. This is one that, as far as the fiscal impact, it's not going to impact the board's finances in any way. It's just a matter of kind of determining when someone would be qualified to offer a CE course and prohibiting those courses where there's clearly that economic interest. The staff recommendation is to support this bill. It really goes to the intent of CE courses to ensure that it's maintaining the skill that's necessary for licensure and that it's not being used as an opportunity to sell from the stage various products and services directly to licensees. The next bill that we have is AB 1028, and that's the reporting of crimes mandated reporters. This bill is very similar to the bill that we saw last legislative session. And what it would do is, on or after January 1st, 2025, remove the requirement that a health practitioner make a report to law enforcement when they suspect a patient has suffered physical injury caused by assaultive or abusive conduct, and instead require a health practitioner who provides services to a patient who they suspect is experiencing any form of domestic violence or sexual violence to provide brief counseling, education, or other support, and offer a warm handoff or referral to local and national domestic violence or sexual violence advocacy services before the end of the patient visit. In addition, this bill would make it clear that the health practitioner is not civilly or criminally liable for any report that's made in good faith and in compliance with those provisions. The thing about this bill is that when the board discussed it towards the end of last year, the board had concerns, not with the intent of the bill, but just with with the requirement specifically that the health practitioner provide the brief counseling or education directly to the patient rather than providing the referral. There was just concerns that licensees may not be adequately trained to provide that type of service, and it might be more appropriate to simply provide the referral. So that's something to note on this bill, but it's very similar to the one that we saw last session. Staff recommendation on that one is to watch.
Is there a huge difference between what we saw before and this one, or are they the same one?
No, it's nearly identical. So that last bill was AB 2790, and it went through a series of amendments. And basically, the last version, as amended, of AB 2790 has been pretty much repurposed into AB 1028 this session.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let me see. We might go down on this one. Nope, I think I'm good with this one since it's kind of it was related to the last one, so we're good.
Okay. Yeah, I have a few more. I'll kind of rattle off some summaries, and then we'll open it up for discussion on any of the bills that the committee might have some questions on. The next one we have is AB 1055 on alcohol drug counselors. So this is the second bill that would create a new board within the department. This bill would establish the Allied Behavioral Health Board within DCA for the licensure, regulation, and discipline of alcohol drug counselors. And it would also prohibit the use of the title licensed alcohol drug counselor by any person who isn't licensed by that board. Just as with the athletic trainer bill, we recommend watching. One of the more substantive bills that we have on the agenda today is AB 1751 Gibson for opioid prescriptions, information, non-pharmacological treatments for pain. So what this bill would do is it would require a prescriber to discuss basically the risks of addiction and overdose associated with the use of opioids with the patient, and as well as the availability of non-pharmacological treatments for pain with the patient before the first prescription for an opioid, unless it meets specified exemptions. And then it would require the prescriber to obtain the patient's consent and then offer, if appropriate, a referral for a provider of non-pharmacological treatments for pain, such as acupuncture, chiropractic care, physical therapy, occupational therapy, or licensed mental health provider services. This bill also would make various findings and declarations about the importance of the awareness of these types of treatments for pain to help combat the opioid crisis. With this bill, it doesn't directly affect the board. It affects the profession as well as other healing arts professions. But given the nature of the opioid epidemic, not only in California, but in the United States, and the availability of other types of treatments for pain, the staff recommendation on this one is potentially to support the bill, just given the consumer protection aspect of making sure that they're aware of the risks of addiction associated with opioids. The prescriber is getting their consent, and then also sharing additional information with them about other treatments for pain. So that's one that's likely going to require discussion by the committee. We have, following that, we have Senate Bill 259 for reports submitted to legislative committees. This one's pretty straightforward. As introduced, it would require a state agency to post on its website any report that the agency submits to a committee of the legislature. There's no concerns from staff on this bill, as whenever we submit a report to the legislature, we would post it on our website. So we simply recommend watching and, of course, complying if it passes. We have Senate Bill 372, which has to do with licensee and registrant records for name and gender changes. And what this bill would do is require the board to update a licensee's record upon receipt with their updated legal name or gender if the board receives government-issued documentation from them demonstrating that their name or gender has changed. And it would also prohibit the board from charging a higher fee for reissuing a document with a corrected or updated legal name or gender than the fee it would charge for reissuing a document for any other changes. So staff has no concerns with this bill. We don't charge any, we the only fees that are charged when those changes are made is the fee for reissuing a license. So there would be no need for us to charge a higher fee or to make any other changes. It's something that would be very simple for us to comply with, and we have no concerns. We recommend that the committee watch the bill, and then, of course, if it passes, then we would work on the implementation of that bill. SB 802, licensing board's disqualification from licensure for criminal convictions. So as introduced, what this bill would do would be require that the board make a notification to an applicant in writing within 30 days after a decision is made to deny their application based solely in part on their conviction history. And whereas current law doesn't specify a time frame. So again, with this bill, there's no concerns as it's introduced with complying with those provisions as it's simply setting a time frame for when, after we make a decision to deny a license, when that notification needs to be made. We also don't anticipate any fiscal impact on having a time frame associated with that notification. So with that, we recommend that the committee watch the bill. And that concludes my kind of brief summary of the substantive bills that we have on our agenda today. And with that, I'd like to turn it back to the committee for discussion of those bills.
Mr. Sweet, did you have any questions on any of the bills?
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions. Ms. Walker, on AB 1028, reporting of crimes and mandated reporters. I know we're looking at the staff recommendation is to watch. I was just curious about, this changes some of the burden that the licensees might have. I was curious if do you know if there's been any licensee feedback on whether that would be something that's potentially burdensome on them or difficult for them to implement in any way?
We haven't had any.
If there was, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. If this was something that's kind of holdover from a previous bill.
Right. So this bill, this concept originated in AB 2790 last session, and then that bill was held and it didn't move forward. So now we're seeing it reintroduced this year. We didn't have any direct feedback from licensees contacting us about concerns from the bill, besides the licensee board members noting that it may be somewhat difficult for all licensees to comply with the requirement of providing the counseling or education, as it's more in the kind of a counseling type mechanism where they may lack the appropriate training to be able to be in that position, because current law requires that they make a report to law enforcement, which is very black and white. You suspect that something's occurring and you make a report to law enforcement. What this bill is doing is requiring that the healthcare practitioner themselves begin by providing that counseling or education and then that handoff for advocacy services. So if there's concerns, especially when we get to the board discussion in April, we could consider relaying those comments to the author, maybe potentially suggesting that it just be a referral, or maybe changing some of the kind of the language around providing that counseling or education first.
Yeah, I was just curious. I'd be curious to hear their feedback on that, because it seems something that's a little bit, could be outside of the wheelhouse of many of the providers. So I was curious. So thank you for that. And I did have one other question on, I think it was the first one that you brought up, AB 765, physicians and surgeons. And it seemed like, of the ones that you mentioned, that this one has the highest likelihood of, some sort of impact, for at least fiscal impact you mentioned for us and enforcement. Do you happen to know what the probability of that passing is, or is this something that's just been kind of introduced and we don't expect that it's actually going to come to fruition?
I would say it's hard to anticipate at this point, because it's just been introduced. It hasn't yet gone to a policy committee, and then as you see it progress, but it's not something that I would say has a low probability of going through. I think it's potentially likely that it could pass. I think This is one where the board, if there's specific concerns or if there's amendments that could be made that would make it kind of more consistent with what would work, we could offer comments or suggestions, suggested amendments to the bill. Whether or not they would be included is kind of difficult to say, but I think the biggest concern here is just with how broad that prohibition is. We're anticipating receiving quite a bit of enforcement complaints relating to the use of titles. So there is opportunity that if we propose some sort of amendments, maybe excluding when someone specifically is using a title such as chiropractic neurologist, which may or may not be misleading to the public, that could potentially help. So this is one where we could watch, or we could kind of provide some feedback to the author of the bill, and maybe through potential amendments.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's all I have.
I think going back to AB 1028, for me, it's, as I'm reading it, I think it's, I just want to clarify in that last sentence in the summary. In addition, this bill would specify that healthcare practitioner is not civilly or criminally liable for any report that is made in good faith. So my understanding is that at least the bill is written right now, requirement itself, so it's no longer black and white, but enters the gray space where there is that warrant handoff, but there is still there is still kind of the option. It becomes optional and becomes kind of at the discretion in good faith by the practitioner if they were to report it. Correct?
Correct.
I'm reading it.
Correct. What it requires that when they suspect it, they need to make the report. But it's creating a carve out that they're not criminally or civilly liable if they either make or fail to make the report. Okay. But it would still mandate that it would change kind of the landscape of when they have to make that type of determination. And then the gray area, of course, is in their own judgment whether or not that patient falls within those reportable circumstances.
Okay. All right. Yeah, because it's very well.
Ms. Cruz, I think you're breaking up a little bit again.
Oh. It was just saying thank you. And I don't have any more questions on this section. Ms. Walker, is any motion required for this section?
So what staff is seeking from the committee is recommendation on positions on these substantive bills for the board's consideration at the April 21st meeting.
Mm-hmm. Would the item, I think that first item, the AB 765, where Mr. Sweet kind of had additional questions for potential feedback, would that be a different staff recommendation option instead of watch to provide feedback, or would it remain watch if we were to provide feedback?
I would say that if we were to develop amendments that we may want to see to the bill, then you could simply provide comments, or there could be a position. Like commonly, like if you're proposing amendments to a bill, you may take a position to support if amended with your particular request. Some cases go the other direction where it says that you're going to oppose unless they amend, which is a little bit of a stronger take, but kind of similar stance. What I would recommend that the committee consider, or that when the board discusses it in April, that they consider taking either one of those positions, like support if amended or oppose unless amended, and then offer those amendments, rather than you typically wouldn't watch and then give them a comment as well.
Okay, So we can probably just keep it as is for now and then change it when we kind of go to the full board. Since we don't have a specific recommendation right now. All right. So I move to take staff's recommendation to, on the different legislative items as outlined in the notes. Will that suffice?
Madam Chair, this is Attorney Ken Swenson. I'm filling in for your General Counsel, Sabina Knight, today. My recommendation would be for the motion to be worded as follows: that the committee approves the staff recommendation and recommends to the full board that it adopt the recommendation. And the motion should be taken up for each individual bill, starting with AB 883, which is the first one, where staff has recommended that there be support of.
So for each particular one, so A through E.
Yeah, so for example, the first one is AB 883, so the motion can be that the committee approves the staff recommendation and recommends to the full board that it support the bill.
The first one being 8. I guess I'm trying to understand which one, because the first one I see is
477, I think.
Just to clarify, when we say to watch a bill, that's not taking a formal position. So I believe what Mr. Swenson is saying is that do an individual motion on any one where it's got an actual position, such as support, which then narrows the list a bit. And then, kind of in light of the additional questions, I think we have watch for AB 765 and AB 1028. So after making maybe those motions to support the bills per the staff recommendations, maybe also entertain a separate motion after that to direct staff to provide additional or to gather additional information on 765 and 1028 for the board's discussion in April, so that we can develop a position on those bills.
Taking notes here. All right. So I will focus specifically on the items that are currently listed as support, starting with AB 883. So I move to approve the staff recommendation for AB 883, business licenses, U.S. Department of Defense Skill Bridge Program, to the full board to adopt staff recommendation.
And I will second that motion.
All right. And question to Counselor, for each one, do we want to take a vote immediately after, or open for public comment?
Before the vote takes place, we should open to public comment. So now you have a motion and a second on AB 883. So if there's no committee member discussion, then you can open it for public comment.
All right, thank you. All right, so any committee discussion on this topic?
This is the moderator. We are now open for public comment on AB 883. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. And I see a request for comment from call-in user 2. Bear with us just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone, and you will need to dial *6 in order to unmute.
Hi, Falcon here again. I'm sorry, I might be speaking out of turn, but I just wanted to make a comment for AB 765.
This is 883,
currently,
sir.
will it be reopened for 765? Pardon me.
If there is a motion on it, there will be.
Okay, then I'll wait for that.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Seeing no other requests for comment, would you like to return to the motion?
Yes, please. All right, Mr. Sweet, please call vote for motion.
Yes, Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Sweet, yes.
All right, thank you. So moved. Next motion, I would like to see. I move to approve staff's recommendation for AB 996, Department of Consumer Affairs Continuing Education Conflict of Interest Policy, to the full board to adopt staff recommendation.
I will second the motion.
Any discussion? No? Moderator, please open for public comment.
We are once again open for public comment on the motion. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand. We will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the motion?
Yes, please. Mr. Sweet, please call vote.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Sweet, yes.
All right, so moved. Next item, I would like to motion to approve staff recommendation on AB 1751, opioid prescriptions, information non-pharmacological treatments for pain, to the full board to adopt staff recommendation.
I will second that motion.
Any committee discussion?
None for me.
All right, thank you. Moderator, please open for public comment.
We are now open for public comment on the motion. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users may dial *3 to raise their hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requested. And it appears our first request comes from Dawn Benton. Hold on just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone. You'll be given 3 minutes with a 15-second warning.
Hello.
Hello, go ahead, please.
Okay, good. This is Dawn from the California Chiropractic Association, and this bill is our sponsored bill, so we really appreciate the board's support on this and the recommendation to the full board. So I just wanted to let you know that we really want your support on this, and thank you.
Thank you. And there appears to be no other request for public comment at the moment. Do you wish to return to the motion?
Yes, please. And thank you for your participation kind of in our public comment section. We appreciate kind of you being online and participating in the process. Mr. Sweet.
Yes, Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Sweet, yes.
All right, so moved. And last item, I would like to move for staff to gather additional information on AB 765 and let's see here, AB 1028 for more discussion in the upcoming board meeting.
I will second that motion.
Thank you. Any additional committee discussion on the topic? No. So, moderator, please open for public comment.
We are now open for public comment on 765, and I believe that was 1028. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. Call-in user 2, please dial *6 to unmute your microphone.
Thank you again. Yes, about the staff recommendation for AB 765 for a recommendation to watch. I would like to further recommendation to include the edit request for the BCE rules and regulations or 331.12.2 and 331.12.3 edition. As it pertains to the title specified to include also physical therapists. I think the current forecast, and at least the college level, are that physical therapists provide adjustments and manipulations just the same as chiropractors. And I don't know if the BCE rules and regulations at the college level, particularly 331.12.2 and 3, specifies that it's different as it pertains to the detection of subluxation, whereas physical therapists do not have the legal scope to include the detection of subluxation. So AB 765, I don't know if I missed it, but I don't know if it's included as one of the titles to be watched for physical therapists claiming that they could provide adjustments when they actually can't, as it pertains to the detection of chiropractic subluxation. Thank you.
Thank you. And there does not appear to be any other request for public comment at the moment. Do you wish to return to the motion?
Yes, please. And thank you so much for your participation in this process. Any questions, you, again, more than welcome to reach out to kind of board staff to discuss your comments at the end of this meeting. And Mr. Sweet, please call vote.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Sweet is yes.
Right, so moved.
Madam Chair, Ken Swenson once again. I would recommend that you open the item up for public comment on any other bills that were discussed but weren't the subject of a motion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's open up for public comment for any of the other bills that were discussed, but not that were not put up for a particular motion.
We are now open for public comment on all of agenda item 4. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, please. All right, moving on to agenda item number 6. I'm sorry, excuse me, agenda item number 5, public comment for items not in agenda. Moderator, please open the comment line.
We are now accepting public comment on agenda item 5, items not on the agenda. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, please. Agenda item number 6. For agenda items, Mr. Sweet, are there any items you would wish to be discussed by the committee on a future agenda?
No, nothing else.
Nothing else. Thank you. For me, it might be, and this might be an offline item or an agenda item, just to kind of start to address how we are going to kind of track the different, what's it called, the different initiatives, the objectives and initiatives within the strategic, within the action plan and how they're presented to the board. I know we've discussed about, kind of the way it's organized is kind of incredibly helpful, but kind of how, what that routine, I would say more visual update would look like, and keeping the board informed of kind of where things are since there's so many things in motion. So for that, I imagine that would require a motion.
This is Ken Swenson. They just need to be identified at this point, and then they can be placed on a future agenda.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. So I would say just that one item for me, kind of board report out of action plan approach. With no other topics, moderator, please open this agenda item for public comment.
We are now open for public comment on future agenda items. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, please. Right, agenda item number 7. I adjourn this meeting. Thank you everyone so much for your time. I'm adjourning at 12:13 p.m. Thank you, everyone.